Hey Rob, nice to meet you.
Hello, very nice to see you as well from across the ocean.
I could talk a lot about you now, but I think before we start the interview, it's a good way that you introduce yourself, maybe.
Yeah, so my name is Rob Greenfield, and I would say I'm an environmental activist, also an adventurer, but generally just a human being that's trying to use my life on Earth to improve the quality of life of others and decrease the ways that I'm decreasing the quality of life of other people, other species, and our Earth as a whole. So simply a guy trying to do the best that I can in this crazy time that we live in to be a good human and inspire other people to be a good human as well.
We had the idea that we already meet in March to the Berlin Travel Festival, but unfortunately we had some corona that made it not possible to meet you. But you were already in Europe at that time. You were stranded in France, right? You had the idea to go by train through Europe and you got stranded. How was that?
I actually flew into Berlin from Costa Rica on March 5th. So I got there just a couple days early so that I could adjust and get rid of my jet lag before the Berlin Travel Festival. And I was walking around Berlin and then I see the big sign that my name is on for the Berlin Travel Festival. And then boom, it's canceled. Well, I was actually supposed to, this year I was supposed to be on a year-long world speaking tour,
Mm-hmm.
speaking in about 100 places, giving up in about 30 or so countries. I ended up going down to southern France to sort of take refuge. And so I ended up spending almost 4 months in France,
Okay.
just kind of in limbo.
But I mean, there are worse places to get stranded than southern France, I think.
Yes, it was like not really stranded. I mean, there was an element of, here I am, but it was also a very conscious choice of, here's the situation. I decided to take a train down to southern France where it would be a little warmer rather than being in northern Europe. And then the other thing was I wanted to be near woods. So I chose to be not in a big city. So I very quickly realized this could be something that could last quite some time,
Mm.
even before lockdown was announced in France. And so I really designed my life so that I would be able to kind of be in it for the long haul, not knowing what would happen.
Mm. Yeah, but I mean, not only your journeys, your plans were cancelled, a lot of plans were cancelled all over the world. A lot of economy couldn't happen as it supposed to be. And after a few weeks after the pandemic started, we could see how nature was recovering and how we had the feeling that the nature is growing back and the world is becoming a more natural place again. So, what would you say? Could we learn from that time of that Corona lockdown about sustainability?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting thing because I saw a lot of the sort of viral stories about nature coming back and our pollution decreasing. And to be honest, I somewhat saw it as a false narrative because the governments had no desire to shut these things down in the long run. This was a temporary lockdown. So when you really looked at the big picture, we knew there was no intention for the most part of changing this in the long run. They were just doing what absolutely needed to be done
Mm.
to reduce the spread of this virus so that business could largely go back to normal, back to usual. And so those are beautiful signs of how quickly things can change, but it's also not a realistic scenario because humans can't really just go inside. In a privileged world, like Western Europe and the United States, many more of us can go inside. But you look at places like India, they choose between staying inside to prevent coronavirus, but possibly starving because they have no food because they're working day to day. But also, on a very positive note, what we did see is we did see so many people start to grow their own food, start to ride bicycles. And some of that was out of fear, and some of it was out of waking up to the system and realizing that this system doesn't work, that it doesn't serve our best interest or the best interest of other species. And some of that is definitely going to be long-term change.
And I think the good thing and the beautiful thing that we could see was that it is possible that nature is coming back, and that the world is not lost.
And when you look at the resilience of nature and the earth in localized ways, there is just an absolute incredible amount of hope. It is amazing to see how quickly things that we have destroyed, that things that we thought we had burned to the ground, just start to come back. And so I see an incredible amount of hope of what we can do as individuals to change our lives, to change our communities, to be, living in a more just, equitable, and sustainable way. And there is a lot to be hopeful about.
You made your life about sustainability and making a difference, bringing people the chance to maybe change for a more sustainable way of life. And a friend of mine, a comedian, once said, well, actually, the most sustainable way of living is to play dead. What do you say about that? What do you think about that?
It depends on what death industry you have. In the United States, death is a very destructive industry. They pump you full of chemicals. They use all these embalming agents. It's not sustainable to die even in this nation either.
Okay.
But actually, not to play dead, but honestly, to do less, to slow down. There is a very noble thing in sitting on your porch and just watching people go by, in playing cards with your friends and playing board games and going for walks in the woods, going for walks down the sidewalk, laying and watching the clouds. All of these things are really, really sustainable things that you can do that, some people could call lazy. But the reality is that we are an overly productive society.
I think that's a very beautiful message to say it. Do less and love. That's good. That's fine. Be fine with that. But yeah, we're a festival about traveling, about sustainable traveling. And yeah, you just said, in a way, the most sustainable way to travel would be not to travel. But I think that we can agree on that traveling can also be important for people, for education. So what do you think, what would you miss if you don't travel at all?
Some people have this blanket idea that by traveling, you are living a less sustainable life. But I've also learned that by traveling, you can live a more sustainable life. I've seen, a lot of times when you're at home, you get wrapped into the consumerism, wrapped into having lots of bills, needing a lot of money to pay for all these bills. But what a lot of people do when they travel is they become liberated of these concepts of needing to buy into all of these elements of society, and they're able to strip themselves way back and live largely out of a backpack in a much more communal way, staying in hostels, for example, and realizing all I need is a bunk bed and the items that I have in this shared kitchen, and people learn to live together and spend time together. And of course, traveling opens people's minds. Like, traveling drastically reduces racism and classism. And so it opens people's minds to that there's other ways of doing things. You see that there's thousands of cultures out there, not just your own, and that there's not just one way of doing things, but there's thousands of different ways of doing things. And the way that you were taught doesn't make it right. It's just one way.
All right. Thank you so much. I think that's a very good last statement. That was very, very interesting, and a lot of information and a lot of good thoughts of you. Thank you so much for sharing that with me and also with the community later on the We Love Travel Festival.
All right, well, very wonderful, and thank you for all your support that you've given me and the opportunity to bring me to Europe. That still, didn't get to do the talk, but I still appreciate you bringing me there. And I hope that next time I come to Europe, we'll be giving each other a real life hug.